You think you can build over my land and just erase 100 years of history with your fake surveys? I slammed the surveyor's map onto her mahogany desk so hard the awards rattled. Patricia Marlowe, HOA, President, Real Estate Developer's Wife. And the woman who thought she could bulldoze my grandfather's legacy didn't even flinch. She just smiled that Ice Queen smile and tapped her crimson red fingernails on the invoice in front of her. Mr. Thorne. We've been very patient. $1.2 million in aesthetic violations. 72 hours to pay or vacate. The foreclosure auction is already scheduled. Behind her. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I could see the massive infinity pool and clubhouse extension, the one her husband's company had built 3 feet onto my property. The one they thought they could hide with manipulated digital surveys. She leaned forward, her diamond bracelet catching the light. Your farmhouse is a blight. Mr. Thorne, this is progress. You can either accept your check and leave quietly, or we'll take it through legal channels. Either way, the demolition permits are filed for next month. I looked at the rusty iron survey pin I'd just pulled from the ground, the one with the 1872 stamp that proved everything she'd built was on stolen land. Patricia, I said quietly, dangerously, you just made the biggest mistake of your life. Because I don't need 72 hours. I need 72 minutes to show this entire neighborhood who the real criminal is. I'm standing on my front porch on a Thursday morning in late September 2024, watching the most spectacular implosion of suburban tyranny I've ever witnessed in my 58 years on this earth. Across the subdivision, a woman is sobbing, not gentle tears, but full-body convulsions that echo between the identical beige McMansions, like a wounded animal realizing it's caught in a trap. She's not crying because someone died. She's crying because a man in a government suit just handed her a court order that stripped her of everything: her title, her power, her husband's construction empire, and the illusion that money could override the truth buried in century-old property records. That woman is Patricia Marlowe, president of the Riverside Manor Homeowners Association, wife of developer Preston Marlowe, and the architect of her own catastrophic downfall. She's currently realizing that the $1 million foreclosure she tried to execute on my family farm has boomeranged into a $2.5 million lawsuit that's about to demolish the very clubhouse she's standing in. I didn't set out to destroy a neighborhood's economy. I didn't want to be the man who exposed fraud, filed criminal complaints, and turned a quiet retirement into a legal war. All I wanted was for my great-grandfather's farmhouse to stand in peace, the way it had since 1892. Without some power-drunk tyrant telling me the original white paint was aesthetically non-compliant, but Patricia started it. She fired the first shot with that crimson envelope full of fabricated fines. And if there's one thing 35 years as a historic restoration specialist taught me, it's that you don't fight rot with cosmetics. You cut it out at the root, down to clean wood, no matter how deep you have to go. Let's rewind 6 weeks to when I still believed in the basic decency of homeowners associations and thought property rights actually mattered in America. I had just retired after 3 decades of bringing old buildings back from the dead Victorian mansions. Colonial farmhouses. Churches with hand-carved pews that had survived the Civil War. I'd spent my career on my knees with chisels and scrapers, fighting against the modern world's obsession with replacing beauty with efficiency. My hands were permanently stained with linseed oil. My knees sounded like gravel in a blender, and my patience for ignorance had reached absolute zero. I had a decent pension, some money saved from restoration contracts with historical societies, and one simple dream: to finish restoring my great-grandfather's farmhouse, the one real piece of architectural honesty left in a county that had sold its soul to vinyl siding and particle board. The house sat on 5 acres in Northern Virginia, about 40 minutes west of Washington, D.C., in what used to be tobacco country before developers discovered they could make more money growing suburbia. The farmhouse was a Queen Anne Victorian built in 1892, with gingerbread trim hand-carved by Swedish craftsmen and a wraparound porch that had hosted 4 generations of Thorne family gatherings. Every nail was hand-forged. Every board was old-growth heart pine. The foundation was fieldstone, laid without mortar by men who understood that proper weight distribution was better than any cement. To me, it was a cathedral to Patricia Marlowe. It was an eyesore that lowered property values. The problems started the day Riverside Manor broke ground on Phase 5 of their development, the luxury clubhouse extension her husband's company was building. I was in my workshop that morning, using a hand plane that had belonged to my grandfather to true up a replacement porch post, when I heard the surveyor's transit beeping near my southern property line. I walked out, wiping sawdust from my hands, and saw 3 men in hard hats setting up equipment right along the creek bed that marked my boundary. "Morning," I called out, walking over. "What's going on?" The lead surveyor, a kid who couldn't have been older than 25, looked up from his tablet. "Grade survey for the Marlowe Development Project. We're staking the foundation for the new pool pavilion." "On whose property?" He checked his screen. "Riverside Manor HOA. Parcel 14B, according to the digital survey. This is all HOA common land." I felt ice in my veins. "Show me the map." He turned the tablet around. The digital boundary showed the HOA property line running 20 feet past my fence line, cutting through what had been Thorne family land since Ulysses S. Grant was president. "That's wrong," I said, voice dropping an octave. "The boundary is the creek bed. That's been the line since the original 1872 land grant." The surveyor shrugged. "Sir, I'm just going off the county GIS system. If you think there's an error, you need to take it up with the HOA." He went back to work, driving stakes into my ground. I didn't yell, didn't threaten, just turned around and walked back to my workshop, mind already calculating the geometry of the problem. They were using a digitized survey probably created when Preston Marlowe bought the surrounding farmland in the 90s to build his subdivision. Those digital maps were notorious for drift, where property lines got shifted by developers to maximize buildable lots. But I had something better than a computer file. I had the original hand-drawn plat map from 1872, certified by the Fauquier County Surveyor and recorded in ink that had survived 150 years. I went to my study, unlocked the fireproof safe where I kept family documents, and pulled out the heavy leather tube that contained the map, unrolled it on my workbench. There. It was boundary marked by the creek known as Willow Run, with iron pins driven at each corner, stamped with the county seal. The line wasn't where their tablet said. It was 20 feet further south, which meant the new clubhouse foundation they'd already poured wasn't just encroaching on my land. It was built on my land. 3 feet of load-bearing foundation, sitting on property they didn't own. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the faded ink, feeling the weight of history in my hands. They'd made a mistake. A massive, arrogant, potentially criminal mistake, and I was about to make them pay for every inch. The next morning, I drove to the Riverside Manor HOA office, a faux Tuscan monstrosity at the subdivision entrance, complete with hollow marble columns and a fountain that wasted more water in a day than I used in a month. I parked my 1985 Ford F-250 diagonally across 2 spots, marked board members only. Not out of spite, the truck was too wide for their golf cart-sized spaces. Walked through the glass doors into aggressive air conditioning and the suffocating smell of synthetic air freshener. The receptionist, a nervous young woman who looked terrified the moment she recognized me, fumbled with her phone. "I'm here to review the official survey documentation for Parcel 14B. I said, voice flat. Under Virginia law, any encroachment dispute requires public disclosure of boundary evidence. I want to see the chain of title and the surveyor's certification for the new construction. Mr. Thorne. All records are digitized and available on the resident portal. I'm not a resident." I cut her off, placing my work-hardened hands on the polished counter. "And since you're attempting to foreclose on my property, I'm now a creditor with legal right to inspect your records during business hours. Open them." She turned her monitor around. I spent 20 minutes reading through digital files. What I found wasn't incompetence. It was fraud. The boundary survey they were using had been commissioned by Marlowe Development in 2005, the year my father died. When I was executor of his estate, drowning in paperwork, the survey showed a corrected boundary that shifted the line 20 feet north, claiming it was fixing a scrivener's error from the original 1872 deed. But there was no error to fix. The original deed was crystal clear. They'd simply redrawn the line to grab an extra strip of land, probably to maximize their density allowance for zoning permits. And they'd banked on an old man and his carpenter son never checking the geometry. Then I found the smoking gun. Buried in an archived folder labeled Rejected Filings, 1996 was a document that made my blood run cold. A correction deed filed by Preston Marlowe, attempting to formalize the shifted boundary. Rejected. Missing required signature of Grantor Thorne. My father never signed it. He was in the hospital in 96, dying of cancer. He never signed anything. Preston Marlowe tried to slip a fraudulent boundary correction past the county clerk, got rejected, and then just built his subdivision anyway, assuming adverse possession would eventually legitimize the theft. But adverse possession requires good faith. This rejected deed proved he knew the land wasn't his. I took pictures of everything with my phone. Then I walked over to the architectural model. Displayed in the lobby, a miniature replica of Riverside Manor Phase 5 vision. The model showed the new infinity pool and sunset pavilion extending off the clubhouse in this plastic fantasy. My farmhouse didn't exist. My barn didn't exist. My land was simply erased, replaced by blue plastic water and tiny lounge chairs. They didn't just want me gone. They needed my land for the physical footprint of their expansion. The $1 million fine wasn't enforcement. It was a demolition notice dressed up as bureaucracy. I photographed the model. Then I walked out into the September heat. Mind no longer clouded by anger, crystallized into something colder, harder, like tempered steel. I knew exactly what I was dealing with now. This wasn't a neighborhood dispute. This was attempted theft via paperwork. And in theft cases, you don't argue, you call the police. But first, I needed to find the physical proof, the iron pins that would prove the boundary beyond any digital manipulation. I went home, grabbed my metal detector and my old Wild Tone Surveyor's Transit, a Swiss-made optical instrument from the 60s that didn't rely on satellites or batteries, just geometry and gravity. Two things that never lied. I started at the point of beginning marked on the 1872 map, a massive white oak near the creek that had miraculously survived development. Set up the tripod. Leveled the bubble with painstaking care. Precision was my religion. I peered through the optical sight, swinging the scope toward the boundary shared with the HOA, specifically where their vinyl fence ran in a perfect, arrogant straight line, according to their digital survey. That fence was the legal border, according to my great-grandfather's deed. The line should be different. I walked the fence line with the metal detector, sweeping in rhythmic arcs. Listening for the high-pitched chirp of iron took me an hour. Sun beating down, sweat stinging my eyes. But then, right at the edge of the clubhouse's manicured lawn, the detector screamed. I dropped to my knees, digging with a hand trowel, tearing through pristine sod that Patricia probably paid $5,000 a month to maintain. 6 inches down. Nothing. 12 inches. Clang. My trowel hit something solid. I cleared away the dirt, revealing the rusted top of a 1-inch iron pipe. Wiped soil from the cap, stamped with a surveyor's license number, Fauquier County, 1,872. I looked up. The HOA's white vinyl fence was 20 feet behind me. But the clubhouse, I stood up, ran a string line from the pin back to the oak tree. The bright orange string cut through the air like a laser beam of truth. It didn't just cross the grass. It sliced right through the decorative retaining wall of the clubhouse and disappeared into the foundation itself. I stood there, staring at the string, heart hammering slow and heavy. They hadn't just encroached with a fence or a garden hose. They'd built the corner of their multi-million-dollar clubhouse on my property. Not inches. Feet. Massive structural, load-bearing feet. The encroachment wasn't cosmetic. It was foundational. I took photos. The rusted pin, the orange string, the wall it intersected. Checkmate. Patricia, I whispered. But I knew this wasn't enough. I needed a witness. A lawyer who could turn this rusted pipe into a legal nuclear weapon. The office of Margaret Sterling occupied the top floor of a glass tower in Arlington, where the air was filtered to sterile perfection and carpet-swallowed sound. I felt out of place in my flannel shirt and work boots, even though I'd brushed off the worst barn dust. I knew Margaret because I'd restored the mahogany conference table in her firm's boardroom 2 years ago. She was the only partner who'd asked about the wood grain instead of haggling over price. I respected that. She understood quality, lived in details. And right now, I needed someone who could see the details everyone else missed. When I walked into her office, she looked up from files, expression guarded. "William," she said, removing her reading glasses. "Unless the varnish is peeling, I assume you're in trouble. People like you don't visit high-rise firms unless something's broken." "Something's broken," I admitted, pulling out the crumpled crimson envelope and photos of the iron pin. the legal system. Specifically the part where a plastic HOA thinks they can steal my farm. I laid the photos on her desk. Patricia Marlowe hit me with a $1.2 million fine. Wants to foreclose in 72 hours. Margaret picked up the envelope. Eyebrows arching. This is aggressive, even for Patricia. But William, if they filed under expedited foreclosure statute, you're in a tight spot. Unless you have cash to pay into court registry, they can steamroll you. I can try emergency injunction, but without hard proof of procedural error. It's a coin toss. I don't want an injunction. I said, leaning forward. I want an eviction. I pointed to the photo of the rusted pin and orange string cutting through the clubhouse wall. I found the original survey pin from 1872. The HOA clubhouse is sitting on my land, about 15 feet of it. Margaret stopped, looked at the photo, then at me, eyes narrowing. William. Survey pins move. Earth shifts. Developers regrade. If you go to court claiming a 150-year-old pipe trumps modern digital survey, they'll laugh you out. That's why we're going to county archives. I said, standing. Not the website. The basement. Digital records are what Patricia's using. I'm betting her husband made sure those look clean. I want to see book and page. An hour later, we were in the bowels of the Fauquier County Recorder's office, a windowless room smelling of vinegar and decaying paper. The clerk pointed us toward rows of massive leather-bound ledgers lining the back wall. Pre-80 property transfers are in back. He wheezed. Don't tear pages. Margaret grabbed the ledger for 1995, the year Preston Marlowe bought surrounding land to build the subdivision. Here's the master deed for Riverside Manor, she said. Flipping pages. Parcels A, B. Looks standard. William, look for exception clauses. I instructed. When my father sold the lower 40 acres in '85, he kept easement for creek access. Developers hate remnant strips because they mess up the grid. We spent 2 hours digging. Then I found it not in the sales book, but in the rejected filings box from 1996, pulled out a microfiche slide, held it to light. Margaret. I called. Voice steady but tight. Look at this. She came over, squinting at the tiny negative. What is it? A correction deed? I explained. Pieces falling into place like a well-cut dovetail joint. Preston Marlowe tried to file this in '96 to fix a scrivener's error in the original purchase. He realized the fence line didn't match legal title. Tried to claim the extra 15-foot strip where the clubhouse foundation sits now was part of the deal. I pointed to a stamp at the bottom. Rejected. Missing signature of grantor. Your father never signed it. Margaret whispered. Realization dawning. Dad was in the hospital in '96. I said, he never signed anything. Preston Marlowe built his subdivision. Realized he was over the line. Tried to slip a correction past the clerk. Got rejected, and then just built anyway. I looked at Margaret. He banked on an old man and his carpenter son not checking geometry. Assumed adverse possession would kick in after 20 years. But adverse possession requires open and notorious use. Margaret countered. Lawyer brain firing. And you can't claim adverse possession against property if you tried to buy it and failed. This rejected deed proves he knew it wasn't his. that kills any good faith claim. She grabbed the document, eyes wide. William, do you realize what this is? This isn't just boundary dispute. This is title fraud. If they use that land to calculate density allowance for zoning permits, the entire certificate of occupancy for the clubhouse is void. I don't care about permits, I said, sliding the document into protective sleeve. I care that the queen of the HOA is sitting on a throne that belongs to me. This proves the $1 million fine is invalid because the violation isn't even adjacent to their legal property. It proves they're trespassing. Margaret looked at me. Slow, dangerous smile spreading. William, she said, pulling out her phone. I usually charge $600 an hour, but for the chance to serve Patricia Marlowe with notice to quit on her own clubhouse, I'll take this pro bono. We need to certify this copy right now. We walked out with certified stamped copies, the rejected deed, and original 1872 plat map. Sun was setting, casting long shadows across courthouse steps. I felt strange calm. The crimson envelope in my pocket felt lighter, its power drained by the weight of truth in my hand. What's the play? Margaret asked. File injunction now? No, I said, looking toward the horizon where Riverside Manor lay. If we file now, they'll bury us in motions, try to settle, offer money to make me go away. I don't want their money. Then what do you want? I want them to feel it. I said. Patricia gave me 72 hours. I'm using 48 to prepare. When this hits them, I want it public. I want the whole neighborhood to see. I turned to Margaret. Can you draft cease and desist for trespassing and demand for structure removal? Margaret laughed, sharp sound of genuine delight. I can draft a demand that'll make her eyes bleed. But if you serve that, you're declaring total war. They'll come at you with everything. Let them come. I said, opening my truck door. They're fighting on my land now. As I drove home, the plan constructed itself in my mind. I had legal proof, physical measurements. Now, I needed to make physical reality match legal truth. I needed to show Patricia exactly where the line was, not with paper, but with something she couldn't ignore. I wasn't just a homeowner anymore. I was a restoration expert, and I was about to restore the truth, one steel post at a time. Next morning, sun rose over Riverside Manor with deceptive calm, painting the stucco mansions in soft peach and gold. But down in my workshop, atmosphere was industrial and cold. I wasn't drinking coffee and reading papers. I was loading my heavy-duty flatbed trailer with equipment that hadn't seen daylight in 5 years, a Hilti core drill, generator, and bundle of 3-inch steel pipes painted violent, high-visibility orange. Margaret Sterling had done her part, drafting a lawsuit that read like Declaration of War. But legal papers were just theory until applied to physical world. I needed to create facts on the ground. In construction, possession isn't 9/10 of law. It is everything. I checked the strap's ratchet mechanism clicking satisfyingly, drove the truck out of my driveway, not toward subdivision exit, but straight toward the clubhouse. 7 a.m. Sprinklers hissing. Landscaping crews just starting. I pulled the truck right onto the curb of the clubhouse parking lot, Heavy tires crushing the decorative begonia bed Patricia probably valued more than human life. Didn't park in a spot. Parked parallel to rear facade. Blocking view of infinity pool. Got out wearing neon yellow safety vest and hard hat. Looked official. Looked like I belonged. That was the secret. If you look like you know what you're doing, people hesitate to stop you. I unloaded the core drill, rolled it across pristine patio, hard rubber wheels thumping against expensive slate tiles. Set up the drill exactly 15 feet from back wall of clubhouse. Referencing the iron pin I'd uncovered. This spot was technically in middle of their sunset lounge area. Right between two wicker chaise lounges, I started the generator. The roar shattered morning silence, echoing off stucco walls like gunshot. I engaged the drill. Diamond-tipped bit into slate with high-pitched scream. Dust flew. Water sprayed from cooling tank. I wasn't just marking ground. I was boring through their unpermitted patio to find my soil underneath. A door slammed open. Patricia came running out of the clubhouse gym. She wasn't wearing her signature crimson blazer yet, just black workout spandex and a look of pure horror, followed by two security guards who looked confused by the professional nature of my vandalism. "What do you think you're doing?" Patricia shrieked over the generator roar. "Stop this! You're destroying private property! Security! Arrest him!" Guards took a step forward. Hands on belts. I didn't stop the drill. Watched the bit sink 6 inches deep. Cutting perfect cylinder from stone. Only when I hit dirt beneath did I kill the engine. Silence rang. I stood up, wiping stone dust from safety glasses. I'm not destroying private property. "Patricia," I said, voice calm and projecting, "I'm installing boundary markers on my property. According to my deed, everything from this hole back to that tree line belongs to the Thorne homestead. You paved over my pasture. I'm just reclaiming it." I picked up one of the orange steel pipes, hammered it into the hole I drilled. The clang of sledgehammer on steel was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in years. "You're insane!" Patricia yelled, pulling out phone with trembling hands. "I'm calling police. I'm having you thrown in jail for felony vandalism. That patio cost $50,000. She dialed 911, screaming at operator about violent intruder with heavy machinery. I just leaned against my drill and waited. I wanted her to call police. That was part of the plan. I pulled folded document from back pocket permit for private land survey and boundary demarcation I'd pulled from county website at 2 a.m. Standard form for fencing disputes. Gave me legal right to mark my corners. While we waited for cops, I drilled 3 more holes, creating dotted line of orange steel that cut right through their lounge area, effectively severing pool from clubhouse. 2 squad cars arrived 5 minutes later, lights flashing. No sirens. Young officer stepped out, hand on holster, looking from Patricia's purple face to my orange steaks. "Okay, folks. Turn down the volume," he said. "Ma'am." Step back. "Sir." Put down the sledgehammer. I complied immediately, raising hands to show they were empty. "Officer." I said respectfully, "This is civil dispute regarding boundary lines. I'm owner of adjacent parcel. I'm installing survey markers in accordance with county code." I handed him the permit and copy of 1872 plat map. "I haven't touched their building. only marking ground. Patricia was vibrating with rage. He's lying. He has over $1 million in fines. We're foreclosing on him in 2 days. He's trying to ruin our property value out of spite. Officer looked at permit, then at hole in patio, scratched his head. Ma'am, if this permit's valid, he's got right to mark his land. If you built your patio on his land, well, that's problem for courts, not police. He turned to me. Sir, can you maybe use spray paint instead of drilling holes? This looks expensive. I shook my head slowly. Officer, paint washes off, steel is permanent, and given this HOA's history of ignoring paper boundaries, I need physical ones. I'm preparing to erect fence within 48 hours. Need these posts set. Officer sighed. Knew a mess when he saw one. Look, he said to Patricia, I can't arrest him for vandalism on his own land if boundaries disputed. You'll have to get judge to tell him to stop. Until then, it's civil matter. He turned to me. Keep it peaceful. Mr. Thorne, no more drilling till noise ordinance lifts at 8 a.m. Handed me back my permit. Small victory, but decisive. Patricia watched police cars leave. Face draining of color. She looked at orange stake sticking out of her slate tile. You won't get away with this, she hissed. Voice low and venomous. We have lawyers. We have money. I will bury you in litigation so deep you won't see sun for 10 years. You don't have 10 years. Patricia, I said, packing up my drill. You have until the annual meeting tomorrow night. I suggest you call your husband and ask him why he tried to file correction deed in '96 and got rejected. Ask him about the missing signature, because when I come to that meeting, I'm not bringing a drill. I'm bringing the truth. Patricia froze. The mention of specific legal term correction deed hit her like physical blow. She knew, or at least suspected. Arrogance cracked, just for a second, revealing fear underneath. She turned and ran back into clubhouse. Slamming door, I finished installing the rest of stakes in silence. By the time I was done, bright orange line, scarred, the perfection of HOA's backyard. A visual scar no amount of landscaping could hide. I stood back and took picture. This wasn't just a boundary. It was a noose tightening around the neck of their legitimacy. Sent photo to Margaret with simple caption, ready for the show. I drove off the patio. Tires leaving muddy tracks on slate. Feeling momentum shift. They'd started this with paper fines. I was responding with steel and stone. Preparation was complete. Stage was set for public execution of their lies. The grand ballroom of the clubhouse was designed to intimidate crystal chandeliers hanging from vaulted ceiling. Air chilled to temperature, suggesting preservation rather than comfort. 300 chairs arranged in semicircles facing raised stage where HOA boards sat like tribunal of minor deities. I stood at back of room, hidden in shadows of heavy velvet drapes. Watching theater of suburban control play out, room was packed. Patricia had done her job well. Fear was powerful. Motivator rumor that crazy farmer was going to bankrupt. Association with his vandalism had brought every homeowner out. Patricia Vance stood at podium, bathed in spotlight. She was wearing it now, that crimson red blazer I'd seen in board photos, tailored to perfection. draped over a black silk blouse with plunging V-neck. Her auburn hair fell in perfect waves past her shoulders, and her lips were painted that same bold red. She looked every inch the queen she believed herself to be. Behind her, massive projection screen displayed photo of my orange steel stakes driven into her precious slate patio. "This," she said, voice trembling with manufactured outrage, "is what we're dealing with. Domestic terrorism, vandalism, blatant disregard for sanctity of our community. Mr. Thorne has not only refused to pay fines, he's physically attacked our amenities. Tonight, I'm asking for vote to authorize immediate legal action to seize his property and remove this threat permanently." Crowd murmured, low sound of agreement mixed with anxiety. Man in front row stood, "But, Patricia, if we sue, won't legal fees drive up our dues? We're already paying $400 a month. It's necessary expense." Patricia snapped, cutting him off. "If we don't enforce standards, property values will plummet. Do you want to live next to a farmyard? Pigs running through manicured lawns?" She was losing them slightly, but fear brought them back. "I have foreclosure papers here. All we need is ratification vote." That was my cue. I didn't walk down center aisle, walked to sidewall where AV control panel was located. I'd restored the wainscoting in this room 3 years ago, knew exactly where conduits ran, plugged my laptop into auxiliary HDMI port hidden behind decorative plant. "I don't have pigs." "Patricia," my voice boomed through overhead speakers, cutting her off mid-sentence. "I have 2 horses, and they have better manners than this board?" Room went silent. Patricia froze, looking around wildly. "Who's doing that? Cut the mic! Security!" I stepped out from shadows, holding remote clicker. I was wearing my best suit, charcoal wool 3-piece I hadn't worn since my wife's funeral. Didn't look like crazy farmer, looked like man who owned the place. Because technically, I did. "Don't bother with security," I said, walking calmly toward stage. I'm member of public addressing corporate entity during open session, and I have presentation of my own. I clicked remote. The screen behind Patricia flickered. Her photo of vandalism vanished, replaced by high-resolution scan of 1872 original plat map. Lines sharp black against white background. Bright red laser line added by me cut across image. "What is this?" Patricia shrieked, trying to stand in front of screen to block it. "Turn it off. He's hacking the system. Sit down." "Patricia," I said, voice dropping to that dangerous quiet timbre that commands attention more than shouting. "Or do you want me to explain to these 300 people why you're trying to steal my house to cover up your husband's felony?" The word felony sucked oxygen from room. Crowd turned to look at Patricia. She hesitated, face pale beneath stage makeup. She sat, not because she wanted to, because her legs gave out. I walked upstairs to stage, ignoring other board members shrinking back in chairs, turned to audience. "My name is William Thorne. You know me as the guy with the old barn. You've been told I'm violator, nuisance, debtor." I clicked remote. Screen changed to split screen image on left. Rejected correction deed from 96 on right. Current satellite view of clubhouse. This document I pointed left is correction deed. Preston Marlowe tried to file 29 years ago. He tried to claim extra 15-foot strip along southern border of my farm. County clerk rejected it because it lacked signature. My father's signature. I let that sink in. He knew he didn't own the land. But look at image on right. I clicked button. Digital overlay superimposed map onto satellite photo. Red line of my property boundary didn't stop at fence. It sliced right through wall of ballroom, cutting off back third of stage where Patricia sat. The room you're sitting in right now. I said, pointing to floor, the foundation of this building, the infinity pool outside, the entire Sunset Pavilion. It's all built on the Thorne homestead. It's not HOA property. It's my property. Gasp went through room. A woman in second row stood. Wait, are you saying clubhouse is illegal? I'm saying it's trespassing. I corrected. Using legal term like sledgehammer, this is called encroachment. In Virginia, when you knowingly build on someone else's land after your deed was rejected, it's considered bad faith trespassing. It voids your insurance. It voids your certificate of occupancy. Patricia stood, voice shrill and desperate. He's lying. That map is ancient. We have digital survey. A digital survey based on fraudulent input. I shot back. Turning on her. I have certified chain of title. Patricia, I have iron pins in ground. I exposed yesterday the ones you called vandalism. Those are legal boundary markers. And you know what happens when you build on my land without permission? I clicked remote one last time. Screen changed to simple invoice, designed to look exactly like fine. She sent me. Same font, same crimson border. Invoice to Riverside Manor, HOA. From William Thorne. Unpaid ground rent. 15 years known. Market commercial rate plus penalty for bad faith use. Total due $2. 500. 000. You hit me with $1.2 million fine for painting my house white? I said, voice ringing in silence. So I did the math. For 15 years. You've been using my land to host parties. Store pool chemicals. Hold meetings. You're squatting on my private property. And since you like strict enforcement of rules, I'm strictly enforcing my property rights. You owe me $2.5 million. Payable in 72 hours. Room erupted. Not just murmurs anymore. Chaos. People shouting, pointing at screen, pointing at board. 2 million? A man yelled. Our dues will triple. We'll be bankrupt. Patricia, another woman screamed. Did you know about this? Did Preston know? Patricia was cornered. She looked at invoice. Then at angry mob that used to be loyal subjects. Power dynamic had flipped so violently, she had whiplash. She grabbed a microphone. This is blackmail. He's bluffing. We have lawyers. You don't have lawyers. I said, leaning into podium mic, so my voice overpowered hers. You have an uninsurable building sitting on stolen land. No lawyer can fix foundation. That's illegal. If you fight me, I'll get court order to demolish this clubhouse to recover my property. I have drill in my truck, ready to start tomorrow. I looked out at crowd, making eye contact with man who'd asked about dues. I don't want to ruin your neighborhood. I don't want your money. I just want to be left alone. But this woman, I pointed calloused finger at Patricia, tried to take my home, tried to steal my legacy. So now, choice is yours. You can keep her as president and face $2.5 million lawsuit that'll bankrupt this association. I paused. Silence was absolute. Or you can remove the board. Drop fines against me. Acknowledge my property line. And we can discuss lease agreement for land under this building. On my terms. Patricia looked at crowd. Eyes wide with panic. She saw what I saw. Calculation happening in 300 heads at once. Loyalty to Patricia costs $2 million. Betraying her. Free. Motion to remove the president, someone shouted from back. Seconded, yelled another. I call for vote of no confidence? Patricia slammed gavel down, sound pathetic and hollow. Order! I demand order! You cannot do this! It's already done! Patricia, I said, turning off projector. Screen went black, leaving her in dark. You wanted to enforce rules? Ultimate rule of real estate is simple. Location, location, location. And you're in the wrong location. I unplugged my laptop and walked off stage. Didn't need to stay for vote. I could hear shouting behind me, sound of empire crumbling under weight of its own arrogance. As I walked down center aisle, people parted to let me through, looking at me with mixture of fear and newfound respect. I wasn't just crazy old man in farmhouse anymore. I was the landlord, and rent was finally due. I stood in parking lot, cool night air feeling like baptism, listening to muffled roar of 300 angry homeowners demanding answers. Sounded less like board meeting, more like revolution, the kind where statues get toppled. But I had no intention of going back to gloat. Real work was arriving in form of black SUV. Phone buzz text from Margaret. Done. Confirming that while I'd been performing on stage, she'd been convincing judge to sign most important paper in Riverside Manor's history. I saw headlights of sheriff's cruiser sweep across hedges, moving with purpose. Sheriff Davidson stepped out, adjusting his hat, and gave me nod, imperceptible to anyone else. Patricia burst through clubhouse doors, hair disheveled. That crimson blazer, now rumpled, looking like shipwreck survivor washing ashore. She saw Davidson, assumed he was her savior, rushed toward him frantically. Sheriff, thank God, arrest this man immediately for disturbing peace, trespassing, inciting riot inside my clubhouse. She grabbed his arm. Breach of protocol that made deputies tense. He's hacked our systems, threatening to destroy community center. I want him in handcuffs now. Davidson gently but firmly removed her hand, stepping back to create professional distance. Mrs. Marlowe, I'm not here for Mr. Thorne, Davidson said, voice deep and carrying weight of law. I'm here to serve you with temporary restraining order regarding property at Thorne Homestead and execute search warrant for financial records of homeowners association. Crowd began spilling out, drawn by flashing lights. Search warrant? For what? This is harassment. I'll call the mayor for forensic accounting, fraud, and embezzlement. Davidson replied, handing her warrant, which she refused to touch, letting it flutter to pavement. Mr. Thorne's attorney provided evidence to district judge regarding legal defense fund you established 3 years ago. Appears 90% of fines collected, including initial lien fees against Mr. Thorne, were funneled into shell company listed as Marlowe Consulting, which has no employees and performs no services. Gasp went through crowd, followed by low rumble of anger. Money they'd paid for beautification wasn't for grass cutting. It was for Patricia's lifestyle. And $1 million fine against me was desperate attempt to plug hole in sinking ship before annual audit exposed them. That's a lie. My husband is respected developer. We provide management services, Patricia stammered, backing toward her Mercedes. 2 deputies moved to block her path. Davidson shook his head slowly. We have bank records. Mrs. Marlowe. Judge saw enough probable cause to freeze HOA assets effective immediately, which means you cannot access accounts to pay legal fees, let alone sue Mr. Thorne. He gestured to deputies, who stepped forward not to handcuff yet, but to escort her away from building she considered throne. You're hereby removed from premises pending investigation. Ordered to surrender keys and access cards to Vice President. Humiliation was total. Absolute. Public played out under harsh LED streetlights, while people she'd terrorized recorded every second on smartphones. Woman from front row stepped forward. We want our money back. Patricia, every cent! Crowd erupted in agreement. Patricia was placed in back of cruiser. She looked at me one last time through reinforced glass. Eyes filled with hate. I didn't look away, just nodded once. Silent acknowledgement that balance of universe had been restored. I walked over to Davidson as cruiser pulled away. Red and blue lights reflecting off pool water, technically sitting on my land. You cut it close. William. Davidson said, lighting cigarette. If she'd filed that foreclosure sale one day earlier. This be messier cleanup. I leaned against hood of his car. I didn't cut it close. Tom. I measured it exactly. That's what I do. What happens to Clubhouse? Davidson asked. Gesturing to massive structure. That's up to them. I said, looking at orange stakes still protruding from slate. Warrant stops money, but doesn't move foundation. They still have building on my dirt. Tomorrow I'm reminding them of that fact. Davidson chuckled. Don't do anything illegal. William, I won't. I promised. Just doing some landscaping. Next morning. Sun rose over neighborhood that felt different. Lighter. Or maybe just leaderless. But silence was broken not by birds, but by deep earth-shaking rumble of diesel engine. I'd called favor from my cousin who ran heavy equipment rental. At 7 sharp. Massive yellow Caterpillar D9 bulldozer rolled down Main Street of Riverside Manor. I didn't drive it through front door. Simply parked it right on edge of my property line. Massive steel blade, hovering inches above slate patio where Patricia had stood. 20-ton paperweight. Mechanical beast, casting long. Terrifying shadow over infinity pool. I sat in cab, drinking coffee. Watching curtains twitch in mansion windows as residents woke to reality of their situation. I wasn't going to push Clubhouse over. Not yet. But presence of Dozer was physical manifestation of leverage. I now held. Ultimate demonstration of raw capacity requiring no words. Villain had fallen. Stripped of title and funds, but castle still stood on my land. And machine was my way of saying negotiation for its survival started now. On my terms. The conference room smelled of stale coffee, cold sweat, and acrid scent of desperate men in cheap suits. I sat at head of mahogany table, the table I'd restored 3 years ago, flanked by Margaret Sterling. Across from us, newly appointed interim board huddled like school children waiting for principal. Outside floor-to-ceiling windows. Massive yellow blade of my D9 cast ominous shadow across room. Silent. Unblinking sentinel. A reminder that while we spoke in English, real language being spoken was leverage. Vice President. Nervous man named Tom, who'd spent years rubber stamping Patricia's decrees, wiped sweat from forehead. Slid single piece of paper across table. Mr. Thorne, he began, voice cracking. We've reviewed association finances. It's catastrophic. After asset seizure by sheriff for fraud investigation. Operating account is essentially empty. We can offer structured settlement of $50,000 payable over 10 years to drop encroachment claim. It's all we have. If you demand more, we fold. I didn't pick up paper. Just let it lie there. Pathetic peace offering that wouldn't cover fuel for bulldozer outside. I looked at Tom, then other 4 board members, measuring their fear. They were terrified not just of me, but of abyss Patricia had led them to. Margaret leaned forward. Air seemed to drop 10 degrees. She didn't look at paper either. Looked at Tom with predatory focus of shark-smelling blood. "Gentlemen," she said, tapping gold pen on leather notebook, sound echoing like gunshot. "Let's be clear about your position. My client has claim for $2.5 million in unpaid ground rent, punitive damages for bad faith trespassing, and legal fees. Your counteroffer is 2% of liability. That's not settlement. That's insult." I sighed, mock exasperation of man who knows retirement will be busier than career. I suppose I can't let neighbor's house fall down. Reflects poorly on street. I walked down steps. We walked to street. Young man looked up, startled to see scary old farmer approaching. "Excuse me," I said. Voice carrying authority that comes from competence. "You're looking at that load-bearing post wrong. Rot isn't in wood, it's in footer. You need to jack it up. Pour new concrete pier." Young man blinked, then smiled relief washing over face. "You're Mr. Thorne, guy who knows how to fix things." "I'm William," I corrected, extending hand. "And yes, I know how to fix things. Grab your tool belt. I'll show you how to do it right." Hour later. Margaret had left, and I was back on porch watching sun descend. I'd spent 40 minutes explaining difference between pressure-treated lumber and heartwood to my new neighbor, Mike. He listened. Didn't argue. Didn't quote bylaw. Just wanted to make home safe for kids. That interaction, more than court order, felt like real victory. I'd transitioned from neighborhood pariah to neighborhood elder. Role I hadn't asked for, but found fitted me like well-worn leather glove. I looked out at rolling hills, at oak trees that stood witness to my great-grandfather's sweat, my grandfather's struggles. my father's sacrifices. Margaret had mentioned developers calling, offering millions for this land. Now that it was famous, I thought about money life-changing amount. Enough to retire to Florida and never lift hammer again. But then I looked at new cedar fence I'd just built. Orange tones glowing in sunset. Looked at workshop where tools were waiting. Where smell of sawdust was perfume of my life. Looked at community center downhill, where I could see kids running near pool safe and loud and happy. Playing on ground I'd secured for them. Private island sounds lonely, I whispered. And Florida's too flat. Wouldn't know how to walk on ground that doesn't have little fight in it. I was creature of this soil. My DNA tangled with roots of these trees. To sell would be to sell limb. I was staying, went back to post. Sandpaper shushing rhythmically against grain. As sun finally dipped below horizon, painting sky in bruises of purple and gold, I thought about journey. Started with letter trying to define me by violations. Ended with lease defining me by ownership. $1 million fine was never about money. It was about erasure. They wanted to erase past, to build sanitized plastic future. Pretend dirt under feet didn't have history, just blank canvas for ego. But dirt always remembers, and as long as there are men willing to dig for iron pins, willing to read old maps, willing to stand in front of bulldozers with nothing but piece of paper and spine of steel history will hold. I finished post, running hand over wood, smooth as glass. I'm ready for oil. Walked into house, carrying framed void notice. Hung it on workshop wall, right next to my great-grandfather's first set of chisels and photo of my wife. It belonged there, tool of different kind. Tool that had fixed broken system. Walked to kitchen. Poured rest of cold coffee down sink. Heard noise outside, not siren, not shout, but whinny of my horse in paddock. Walked out back door. Sun was gone, but twilight lingered. Soft and forgiving. I looked down at HOA clubhouse one last time. Lights coming on. Figures moving inside. Having meeting, probably discussing budget for summer barbecue or pool deck repair. Boring. Mundane. Wonderful problems. I took deep breath. Filling lungs with cool evening air, tasted of victory, not sharp metallic taste of adrenaline. But slow. Sweet. Earthy taste of endurance. I'd forced HOA off my property. Yes. But more importantly, forced them to recognize property is more than asset class on spreadsheet. It is home. It is responsibility. I sat on porch swing my wife had loved, pushing off gently with boot. Chain creaked familiar. Comforting sound marking end of every day for 30 years. Let them have their rules. I whispered to empty air. Closing eyes and listening to wind rustle through oak leaves sound that had been here long before bylaws. Would be here long after they were forgotten. I have the land, and in gathering dark, with stars beginning to poke through canopy above like survey pins in sky. That was enough. War was over. Dust had settled, and Thorn Homestead was still standing, exactly where it was meant to be.